title of this lesson. We don't see much about him. Somebody had a comment, and I forgot now exactly what the number was. He's only mentioned like named 17 times in the Gospels, so he's not one that is prominent at all, but yet there's some very important things that he did. And so that's some of what we want to look at. But an icebreaker question he put in here. These are his slides, most of them, part of them are mine, that I added to it. But have you ever heard it said of a brother, he has always lived under his brother's shadow? Now, I've got an older brother. And I don't know that I had to live under his shadow. He was a tremendous help to me a lot of times growing up, especially about the time I got out of high school and trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and didn't know where I wanted to go to school or what I wanted to do, and just as confused as teenagers can be sometime. And he was able to warp me back in line, maybe. But how do brothers sometimes feel in a situation like this? That's typically a negative kind of comment, that you had to live under his brother's shadow. What kind of feelings does that sometimes cause up in that younger brother?
Well, what a man was, and my brother was a couple of years ahead of me in school, and he was a scholar. Well, I just done little as I could to get by, the way I taught and all of that. And every teacher that he had, when I don't see why you can't act like your brother. I can't see. But let me throw this in too. He made a gospel preacher. And he had one of the biggest influences on my life to do right. I had good parents, but he had the biggest influence on me to encourage me to do the right thing and be a Christian than anybody. And I'm indebted to him forever.
Yep, they can do that. Yeah, I had the same third grade teacher my brother did, and he's 7 years older than I am. Had the same sixth grade teacher my brother had. So yeah, there was a line of us that went through that had those same teachers. My sister that was in between us. So yeah, we, for good or bad, had to deal with some of that. Yeah, I remember your folks. What else? What are some of the other feelings that can come along from something like that? Not necessarily what you might have experienced, maybe things that you have seen in other situations. Jealousy, that can certainly be one. That the younger brother's jealousy, maybe of the attention that the older brother got, maybe of some of the success that might have had because of some decisions they made. What else? Lack of confidence, okay, because you can't live up to that standard. So it destroys your confidence in yourself, that you can't live up to him because of maybe this difference in abilities. So that certainly could be one. You know, Wayne was a hard worker and always a go-getter and a smart guy. And I didn't always work as hard as I could have and should have, maybe, but some of that can certainly happen. I'm sorry? Resentment? Okay, yeah, you might resent them or other people's attitudes toward them, or they seem like they favor him more than they do you, and some of that. So certainly resentment is one of them.
Somebody's lazy, thinking that the older one will take care of them in the future.
Okay.
Make up for their slowness.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, need somebody to look out and take up for you like that. Yeah, I had the 4, 5, or 6 things down here. Overlooked, inadequate, which would be kind of the lack of confidence, jealousy, envious that was mentioned, resentful. Sometimes anger may be a part of it. So that certainly could be a number of things that could cause some hard feelings and some strife between those in that regard. But going on here to the lesson we're either going to get through really early, or I'm not going to get anywhere near the material I've got. So I don't know which. This is kind of a hard thing to do, to have enough for one session and make it come out right. That's not a skill that I've developed too well. What does Andrew's name mean in Greek? And do you think he lived up to this name? Manly or strong? Okay.
Brave, courageous warrior.
Okay.
That's the one
All right, brave, courageous, and warrior. All right. But do you think he lived up to that name? And in typical teacher fashion, why do you think that? What? Go ahead.
He died on the cross if history is proven right.
Okay.
And you'd have to be pretty brave and strong to do that, I would think, because he proclaimed Christ.
Yeah. He couldn't be intimidated, to give up his faith. Anything else that you would see out of that? Out of maybe the example we got there? He was an independent thinker. He came to his own conclusions based on what evidence was presented to him. We'll get into a little more of that as he began to follow Jesus and that question or two. He wasn't afraid to change when he found something new, something that was accurate, something that was the truth. And he moved from following John to following Jesus. He wasn't afraid to speak up, to talk to others. He wasn't afraid to welcome outsiders. And again, these things are things that we'll talk about as we go on through here. Andrew may be a better model for most church leaders than Peter, because most who enter the ministry will labor in relative obscurity, like Andrew, as opposed to being renowned and prominent like Peter. Andrew's name means manly, and it seems a fitting description. Of course, the kind of net fishing he and the others did required no small degree of physical strength and machoism. But Andrew also had other characteristics of manliness. He was bold, decisive, and deliberate. Nothing about him is feeble or wimpish. He was driven by a hearty passion for the truth, and he was willing to subject himself to the most extreme kinds of hardship and austerity in pursuit of that objective. So I think some of the things we have talked about there certainly are included in that quote from John MacArthur in the book 12 Ordinary Men. Right. From whom does Andrew first learn of Jesus? Right, John the baptizer. As he was standing beside, John was standing there with two of his disciples in John chapter 1, verse 35 through 40. And when they saw him, and John said, "Behold, the Lamb of God," the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Jesus turned and saw them following and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying and stayed with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. What was John's job? Andrew was a fisherman. What was John's job?
Prepare the way for Jesus.
I'm sorry?
To prepare the way for Jesus.
All right, to prepare the way for Jesus. And here certainly is a case where that worked just exactly as God had intended for it to. When John made the statement about Jesus, then he turned and followed him. This was a little more difficult one for me to try to find the answer to, or what the writer might have had in mind. Before one can lead, what must he first be willing to do, as Andrew demonstrates? Follow, okay? And learn, yeah, okay?
Hear and listen.
Care, listen.
Listen.
All right. Folks, anything else anybody wants to mention there? So leadership requires a strong work ethic, dedication, patience, the ability to face hardship and disappointment, and probably takes all of those things to be a good fisherman too. Think about fishing all night, not catching anything. Take some patience and dedication to go back and try it again. A lot of hard work with that from a physical standpoint. Overcoming obstacles and opposition requires some mental toughness, the ability to recover from a setback or a failure, the ability to keep a goal in sight when conditions are contrary to your work, the ability to keep your emotions under control in difficult and dangerous circumstances. If you've been out in the boat in a storm, dangerous and difficult situations, and it takes some mental strength to keep your emotions under control and to overcome the situations there. And certainly that'll be the case in facing persecution as well in the work of God.
He first had to acknowledge that Christ was the Son of God.
Okay, had to acknowledge that Christ was the Son of God, and that was a change that he made from following John to following Christ because of that statement that John made. Who are some strong leaders from the Old Testament? Joshua? And why?
He led them into the promised land against the giants and then much larger groups of people and fighting groups just trusting in God. Okay.
Yeah. Joshua, a certain one. Another one? Nehemiah. Certainly he was to rebuild that. The city and the opposition he faced, the strength he had, the planning he did, just a bunch of wonderful lessons of leadership from Nehemiah. Might want to name another one or two. Noah, for the time that he preached and didn't get any response, but yet he and his family were saved. A lot of dedication and devotion there. Certainly Moses would have been one. I put Esther. Might not think about her. Again, she's one who most of her work was done behind the scenes. She was in a very prominent position, but she wasn't one that appeared before the public. She did that kind of behind the scenes with the king and with Haman and the other things that maybe went on there. Daniel, most of the prophets. How about from the New Testament? Who were some that you might think about there that were looked at as strong leaders? Sorry. Paul, okay, yeah, he certainly would have been one. Jesus, for obvious reasons. The apostles, most of those would have been, just from what we know of their actions and the work that they did. Barnabas, he saw potential in John Mark, and he was willing to take him and go without Paul. And so he went from being kind of the second guy to being the first one. But also he started out, he was maybe the primary speaker when they first started on the journeys, and then Paul seemed to take his place after that. Titus and Timothy, based on the confidence that Paul put in them to correct wrongs and set in the order the things that were needed, that he had the confidence that they could lead in doing that. So there are a number we could look at as some examples of leadership in both the Old and the New Testament. Ma'am? Aquila and Priscilla, okay, and the teaching that they did and correcting Apollos, and Apollos as he accepted that correction. Right. What was Andrew's occupation? We've already talked about this a little bit. He was a fisherman. What new occupation did Jesus have for him? Become a fisher of men. All right, so he would change from trying to bring men, fish in the nets, to bringing men to Christ. In Luke, I haven't got the passage down there, I left it off, it's chapter 4, verse 19. But he said, "Come, 10 unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw the other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, and he called them, and they immediately left. So both of these sets of brothers immediately followed Christ when they were called. How do you think hard work prepares one for leadership?
Perseverance.
I'm sorry?
Perseverance.
Perseverance, okay, yeah. It can be a lot of work, not necessarily physical work, but mental work, and that can be just as tiring and as draining and emotionally draining as the hard work is. So certainly that's something that is needed there.
You build problem-solving skills.
Okay, problem-solving skills, that's one that I had down here as well.
Makes you realize that things don't just happen without effort.
All right.
Fish don't get into that boat without you pulling that net, dragging them in. You know, some people think that things just are handed to you and it just happens, but that's not reality.
And that's certainly the case in leadership. And there's so many things that have to happen behind the scenes. Like the earlier slide said, those who lead in the church today, so much of their work is behind the scenes that is never seen. So many of the members just don't appreciate because they don't see that. It requires a strong work ethic, dedication, patience, the ability to face hardship and disappointment. Overcoming obstacles and opposition requires mental toughness, the ability to recover from a setback or a failure, the ability to keep a goal in sight when conditions are contrary to what you're wanting to do or needing to do, and again, keeping emotions under control in some difficult situations. All right.
You also just described a murder or a life. A leader in the home, not.
Okay,
not
that's
over her husband.
a good point.
She's to teach the children about the Lord, do lots of preparation on her behalf. Plus, she's got to clean the house and take care of the kids and all of that. So
All right. Yeah,
be a
there's
strong person to bring up children.
a good point to go with that. Who does Andrew seek to bring to Jesus first? Heard a couple of things here. What? His brother, Peter. Okay. So that was the case. Now Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee. He saw the brothers, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother. They were fishermen, and that's question 3, not 4. One of the two who heard Jesus speak from John chapter 1 and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He found first his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which translated means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "And you are Simon, son of John. You should be called Cephas," which is translated to Peter. So how does the desire to share one's Jesus with our family help us to look to them as leaders? And some of that things Pat just mentioned, that mother is the responsibility she has in the home to do that. But what other things would you see in that, in trying to share Jesus with a family to help someone maybe see you as a leader?
Make decisions.
Decisions?
It shows that they care for their family and want the best for them, so, knowing Jesus and what he offers helps them to know that, hey, you care for me and want me to have the same benefit.
Okay. All right.
They're also willing to have those hard conversations with the family, like Chris mentioned.
Yeah. They can be hard to do.
Yeah, like when you're talking to the right family that, you know, you truly care about, like Chris said, that you want the best for them, and you want to try to give them the best advice to better their lives. And, you know, sometimes it just means you being honest enough, to tell them about it for that.
All right.
But it's a big risk to do that, when they have those hard conversations, when
Yeah.
they're willing to make a stand for that.
Okay? Yeah.
Leadership and influence.
Okay? Leadership and influence. And the city, that can be some of the more difficult conversations to have with them because you're right there with them all the time. And if you stir up any hard feelings or emotions get maybe a little out of control, it can be a very difficult situation. But it says what goals should we have within our own family. List the passages there. Hope you have looked at those. Ephesians 6 and verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Those from the Old Testament in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. The words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. So again, as Pat mentioned a while ago, mothers and of course fathers as well, teaching those things constantly and keeping them in front of the children. And so many times mothers have the opportunity to prevent life situations and apply scriptures to those as they maybe are out with children and see things going on. In 1 Peter 3, wives, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won by the word without a word. Pardon me. they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. Right. Think how the church would grow if Christians would teach their families, even just those within their house. We all need to see the home as our primary ministry. It is a mission field. God has always placed an importance on teaching the family. And certainly we see that from the verses that we just read there as well. And question 5, in John 6, verses 5 through 13, who does Andrew bring to Jesus?
The 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Okay, another one where we don't know his name, but he played a role in a great miracle here. This young lad that had the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. This little boy did not have much, but Andrew believed Jesus could find a way. We talked about this a good bit in the previous quarter about the miracles. How important is it for good leaders to optimistically notice little people and encourage others to use small things to serve the Lord? Very important. I agree.
Without those small things, like the church wouldn't function the way that it does now. There are a lot of little things that we don't know people do, and it makes a big difference.
It's almost like a little sin, right? A little thing that is very important. They maybe not, in our minds, not quite the same comparison, but it seems like it could be there. Right, so, yeah. Remember the poor widow in Mark chapter 12 that cast in 2 small coins? And Jesus said, truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury, for they put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all that she owned and had to live on. You think of others that may have done some things or failed to do some small things that they could have done.
The woman that washed Jesus' feet was a small thing, but it was really a big thing.
All right. It was a big thing, and when she was criticized, Jesus defended her for what she had done in washing his feet. The 1-talent man was condemned for not using what seemingly small ability that he had compared to the 10 and the 5-talent man. 1 Corinthians 12, maybe not quite the same context. I think it's still a lesson there in especially verses 18 through 25, talking about the difference in numbers. We don't all have the same ability, but everyone is important. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, to a much greater degree, the members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary, because there are things that they can do that can be done. God has composed the body, giving more abundant honor to the member which it lacked, so that there be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care one for another. So I think it's always important there to remember that. What are some little things that are often overlooked, or maybe we don't see or don't think about as much, that need to be done, that there certainly are members here that are very good at looking for and seeing these things. But what are some of those little things that might get overlooked? Preparing the Lord's Supper, preparing other things around the building, taking care of things here so that when we come in, everything is in order. A lot of those things are behind the scenes that we just don't always see.
Sometimes just a kind word at the right time, just a mere kind word at the right time when people's going through difficult times, how much it can mean to them.
How do we know when that happens?
What an influence it has.
Yeah. How do we know when somebody needs those kind words?
If you know them, you probably see it on their face or in their demeanor if they are down and out.
Okay, can be able to tell by their expression, by something that they say.
If
Yeah,
you know
so,
them, they'll tell you also probably.
yeah.
A lot of times we don't know, so we just need to do it all the time.
There you go. That's the one I was looking for. You never know when it might be needed, and when that kind word just might be the pick me up that somebody needs. Exactly right. How do we grow? How do we get out of our comfort zones? Do you just leave here and run over there and all of a sudden you're doing big things? Or do you start with little things and grow and more and more and more? So they are not only for the benefit of others, but they're for the benefit of ourselves, that we get out of that. We never know when somebody else may need that word of encouragement because of the things that they start out doing in an assembly and may struggle a little bit, but encouragement to help them do that, and they will progress maybe from just a scripture reading to making a talk or some other things that they can be able to do in that. In John 12, 20 to 22, who does Andrew bring to Peter? Andrew bring to Jesus. He's already brought Peter, hadn't he? I'm going to fall over sideways here in a minute. Who does Andrew bring to Jesus in this passage? Some Greeks, all right. And what was so unusual about that?
They were not Jews.
No, they weren't Jews. They were there. So, how might others have treated this particular group?
You might just avoid them.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You might just avoid them.
Avoid them, okay. That certainly be the case because of the difference in the cultures and the background of the two.
Consider them as outcasts.
All right, some as outcasts. All right, yeah, and avoided them because of that. They might have ignored them because they're different. They might have been prejudiced against them. Said these are the troublemakers. They're going to come in here and start upsetting things. They may be curiosity seekers. They may be scoffers that are going to come in here and try to upset the things that we're doing. So it might have been a number of things that could have happened there. But Andrew, when they brought to him, he immediately turned and took them to Jesus to fulfill their request to be able to see him. How does good leadership treat outsiders who are looking to learn more about Jesus?
They take the time and have patience to answer the questions that they may have.
All right, take the time to answer the questions that they may have. Treat them with respect. Sometimes you can tell pretty quickly if somebody's just asking questions to be argumentative or to try to cause a problem, but we certainly should welcome them, respect, and try to make them feel comfortable, even if they have different beliefs, with a genuine interest in their soul, regardless of what their attitude may be. Ours needs to be that we are interested in their souls and trying to answer these questions that they've got, help to find out maybe where they are spiritually and how we can help them to get to where they need to be.
For example, too, we can't teach somebody if they know that we're not the kind of person that we expect them to know.
All right, our example, we can't be hypocritical. We've got to be living what we're trying to teach to them. That's a good point. In John 12, 20 through 22, some Greeks wanted to know about Jesus, and so Andrew introduced them. It is each Christian's job to introduce others to Christ. It is not just the responsibility of the preacher or the elder. It's not even the totality of their job, although they should lead by example. Their job is to help every member become a minister in his or her circle of influence. The apostles, prophets, evangelists, and shepherds were given to equip every member to minister to others. The most effective evangelism rarely takes place in the pulpit. It takes place in the passenger seat of a car, at a kitchen table, or at a bus stop. From Byron Nash in his book, The Messiah's Misfits. And how is Andrew introduced in the following passages? We've talked about this a little bit, but certainly Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother. Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother. He saw Simon and Andrew his brother. Simon, who is also named Peter. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Over and over and over again, Andrew seems to be playing second fiddle to this, but yet he was very instrumental in some things that he did. How does some feel when they're not honored by men?
Jealous?
Jealous?
It's out there, not them.
They feel like they aren't getting the credit that they need. What other words would you use for some of that? Offended, certainly. Left out, overlooked, insulted, angry, resentful, jealous, some of the things like we talked about in our question earlier. Discouraged. I did this and nobody recognized it and nobody said anything to me about it. Well, you did it. God saw it. And if it was a good thing, then you will have your reward for that. Why is Andrew's obliviousness to fame and recognition an important detail for leaders?
Shows that it's not the recognition that makes you a leader. Like there's the qualities that you exhibit are what make you a leader, not the fact that people might see you as a leader.
All right. It's not what people see, but it's the qualities that you exhibit and the way that you do your work. True leaders are interested in the work, not in themselves. What else? Anything else you'd want to mention there?
The eternal reward is the same, whether you get recognized and praised or not.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. All right. That's certainly true. And leaders are happy when the goal is achieved, whether or not they get credit for that. And true leaders recognize that credit should be given where credit is due. So it's good to recognize people for what they do, but again, that needs to be in the proper way and with the right amount of respect for this. Of the four in the inner circle, however, Andrew was the least conspicuous. Andrew lived his life in the shadow of his better-known brother. Many of the verses that name him add that he was Peter's brother, as if it were the fact that made him significant. In such situations where one brother overshadows another to such a degree, it is common to find resentment, strong sibling rivalry, or even estrangement. But in Andrew's case, there's no evidence that he begrudged Peter's dominance. What's your biggest fear if you had to stand before an audience?
Mine to say something that ain't spiritual or scriptural. After a while, I'm up there and making blunders and say, misquote something.
All right.
Or lose my place and I can't find write the wrong scripture down and I can't.
You say that, and I just turned my page numbers over here, and I got page 1 back on the top. We're not going to start over. All right, so yeah, forgetting what you're going to say, that's happened to any of us that have been up here very much. The fear of saying something wrong, and sometimes you just have to go back and correct it. But certainly those are both things there. Saying something wrong, wording something poorly, misusing a word, mispronouncing a word, or just flat out making a mistake. Do you have those same fears when you're talking to somebody in private? Probably not, because it's a more casual, relaxed atmosphere. And it's not just standing in front of a group like this. It's from that fear. What I was trying to get to was it could be in any setting. Was making a presentation at work, teaching a Bible class in somebody's home, talking to a group of ladies about some craft or cooking or what else it might be. So if we can talk to people about anything in any other place, why can't we talk to them about the Bible and about Jesus and about their faith to try to bring them to Him? So maybe we need to think about that, and don't be afraid to tell somebody, I don't know, I'll find the answer, or we'll go together and talk to somebody else that can help us both come to a better understanding of this. All right. Andrew is usually speaking to individuals, not preaching to crowds. Is everyone comfortable talking to a crowd? No, everyone is not. How does Andrew's example make us better personal evangelists? A little self-examination here. I won't necessarily go into that, but certainly the events recorded, he may not have had all the answers, maybe he did, but he knew someone who did, and certainly he took his acquaintances to see Jesus. With Peter, he said, come see. So sometimes we just tell folks, come, go to a service with me and see what we do. If you have questions, let's talk about it. If you see something different here to what you see where you go, let's talk about the differences and why we're doing things like we are, or why someone else has a different interpretation, different understanding of the Bible. All right, about the,
According to the history that I read about him, but, not biblical history, but apparently he did do some public talking later on before he was killed.
Yeah.
Because he really got riled with the people in authority.
From some of the extra biblical history, we'll get into that here. It's crucified on a cross, the two ends of which are fixed transversely on the ground. It's a derivation of the term St. Andrew's cross. It talks about what kind of sacrifices to make. The map here, there's one I was looking for. Jerusalem, Israel being down here, it's different accounts. Some of them said he took him like 4 missionary journeys up through Asia Minor over into maybe some parts of Europe. One talked about a great deal of work he did up here with the Scythians in Ukraine and southern Russia. And so he's a long ways from home if he was up in that area up there. But again, that one of them named out the 4 missionary journeys that he took, just like Paul did, in different areas that he went around through this. Again, to somebody else that Pat mentioned there, this Patras, which is on part of Greek up here, he was preaching there. The governor tried to stop him from secular history and was trying to wipe out Christianity. He kept going. He was crucified, as he said, on a cross shaped like an X. History has it, tradition has it, that he hung there for 2 days before he died. And even while he was hanging on that cross for those 2 days, he was still trying to talk to people about Jesus until he died. That devotion, that dedication that he had, even though he wasn't as prominent as others, no doubt he was a very faithful and dedicated servant of Jesus throughout the work that he had been assigned to do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your participation in the class.